This is the IS-3 kit in 1/100th scale from Zvezda. The IS-3 is a Russian heavy tank produced at the end of the Second World War. It arrived too late to see service, but served for years during the Cold War. This vehicle continues Zvezda's trend of producing unusual or rare vehicles in this scale. You can see my box is a bit squished. It's come all the way from my eBay seller in Latvia, but it is good, strong Soviet tank, so no harm done. If we have a look at the back of the box, there's a 3-view illustration of the completed unpainted kit. The kit is about 10 centimetres long and has 25 parts, a high parts count for a Zvezda kit. Let's look inside. There are 2 sprues of dark green plastic and a 1-page instruction leaflet. The instructions show several steps, and the construction uses the standard snap-together format with internal bracing pieces. Here's the first sprue. It has the upper hull and turret pieces as well as the mantlet and gun. Engine deck detail here is good, and the nose has the characteristic pointed shot-deflecting shape. Turret hatches are all moulded closed. The second sprue has the side and lower hull pieces, as well as the one-piece tracks and the external fuel drums. Track detail is simplified as is common on Zvezda kits at this scale, but the road wheel detail is good. Overall, the parts here look good, up to the usual standard of Zvezda 1/100th scale kits. The simplified tracks are usually okay. The hull engineering is a bit complex, using the snap-fit construction and internal bracing. Again, I suggest using glue here as well, and some commenters on my previous videos mentioned they omit the bracing pieces altogether. I will admit, given this is a heavy tank, I was expecting it to be a bit bigger, but the last few Zvezda kits I've built have been the huge German late-war monsters. So let's build it. I'm starting with the lower hull. Clip the lower hull, hull side and internal bracing pieces from the sprue. Attach these to the bracing piece, making sure you get a tight fit without gaps. A word of caution, the internal hull bracing piece looks symmetrical, but it isn't. There's a right and a wrong way up. The shorter posts need to go towards the bottom of the hull. I got this wrong and the hull sides wouldn't fit. There was then a bit of a massacre before I got it sorted, so don't make my mistake. Next comes the upper hull piece. Snip this off the sprue. You will also need to cut out these wing pieces that extend out under the turret overhang. They fit through the hull piece from inside, so it's important to do this before you mate the upper and lower hull assemblies. Once these wings are in, you can mate up the hull pieces. Then you can add the tracks. Cut them off and trim, then press them onto the posts on the hull. These will only go on one way, so you can't get this wrong. Finish off the hull with the external fuel tanks. The bigger tanks go on the hull sides, while the shorter, fatter ones go on the rear plate. There are also some track pieces to fit here. So that's the hull complete. Now we can move on to the turret. Start with the internal bracing piece, as well as the upper and lower turret pieces. Cut these from the sprue and trim. Once these are fitted together, add the turret front piece. Next we can cut out the gun and mantlet pieces. Fit them together. The gun is keyed so it fits to the mantlet the right way. This assembly can then be pushed onto the turret. Notice that unlike some other Zvezda kits, there's no elevation mechanism for the gun. It's fixed in place. The last piece to finish this up is a mantlet cover. There are posts and holes to secure this. So here's the completed kit. It's still a bit smaller than I was expecting, but a low silhouette was a feature of this design and it does look great. The detail is generally good, and this is another simple but effective kit from Zvezda. Watch out for the hull bracing piece during assembly, but otherwise this goes together well. It captures the low domed shape of the IS-3 turret and the sharply angled hull. Although the IS-3 traces its ancestry back to the KV and earlier IS series heavy tanks, it was outwardly very different in appearance. One of the characteristic features here is the prominent pointed front hull, which earned the IS-3 the nickname the Pike. It also had a new low-profile dome turret shape, which was to become a common design for later Soviet tanks. These new features, as well as the sloped hull side armour, were all designed to maximise armour protection and encourage shot deflection. Classed as a heavy tank, the thick armour was coupled with some heavy firepower, mounting a long-barrelled 122mm D25T gun. Ammunition was two-part and only 28 rounds were carried, 10 AP and 18 HE. The IS-3 arrived too late to see any fighting in World War II. The first 3 production prototypes were shipped to Germany but arrived after the surrender. IS-3s were included in the Allied Victory Parade in Berlin on the 7th of September 1945, where they caused consternation and shock amongst Western observers. Despite the fearsome appearance and reputation of the IS-3, it did have some trouble with the antiquated transmission, a direct descendant of the one used in the original KV series. The heavy gun was ill-adapted for tank use, and the two-part rounds, limited ammunition and low rate of fire of only 2 to 3 rounds per minute were drawbacks. Some of the mechanical problems were addressed in 1948 with a modernisation program that resulted in the IS-3M. The IS heavy tank series continued to be developed, eventually resulting in the IS-10, renamed the T-10 after Stalin's death. However, the Soviets reached the same conclusion as their Western counterparts about heavy tanks. During the Cold War, the heavy tank concept had been overtaken by medium tank designs, which had evolved into the main battle tank, a single design with adequate protection and firepower to undertake all battlefield tasks. As well as limited Cold War service with some Warsaw Pact nations, the IS-3 was exported to Egypt, seeing service in the 1967 Six-Day War. 3 captured examples were later used by Israel. There are no official stats for using the IS-3 in Flames of War. However, there are IS-3M stats for Fate of a Nation. The IS-3M is a slow tank. In 4th edition Late War rules there's a chart for movement on page 18, giving the tactical, terrain dash and other movement distances. In this case, note the cross-country dash and road dash are both reduced by 2 inches or 5 centimetres because the IS-3 has the unreliable rule. Crosses are 3+. The IS-3 is well armoured, with front armour 12, side 10 and top armour 2. This hefty side armour makes this a good breakthrough tank, as it can take a lot of punishment all round. Note that the Flames of War website has some higher armour stats, but the figures quoted here come from the Fate of a Nation Arsenal PDF. Looking at the weapons, the IS-3 has a 12.7mm AA machine gun at the commander's position, and a 7.62mm DT machine gun mounted coaxially. Interestingly, the website stats also list a hull machine gun, but as far as I can tell this was never fitted to the IS-3, so I'd ignore that. The main armament is the D25T 122mm cannon. This has a 32-inch or 80cm range, a rate of fire of 1, and an anti-tank of 15 with the 2+ firepower. The big gun is brutal and has the breakthrough gun rule. In version 4, this means infantry, gun and unarmoured tank teams must re-roll successful saves when hit by this weapon. Interestingly, the IS-3M also has the slow traverse rule, but in 4th edition this has no effect and can be ignored. So those are the stats. The IS-3 is heavily protected and has a hard-hitting gun. The impressive side armour makes this hard to kill from any angle. However, it is achingly slow on the table and has a slow rate of fire for the main gun. The same sort of smoke and out manoeuvre tactics that work against heavy German tanks should also work here, although some opponents' tank guns will still struggle against 10 armour in side shots. The breakthrough gun forcing re-roll of saves makes this devastating against infantry, gun and unarmoured teams. But there are no Flames of War lists that include IS-3s, and I have no idea what the points cost might be. This will make it hard to field except against a sympathetic opponent. The Fate of a Nation Forces PDF lists 5 IS-3M for 245 points, up to 10 for 400 points. So that's the IS-3 from Zvezda. The end result looks great, and this is a fun option to have available in 15mm. However, while there are some stats for it, there are no Flames of War lists that offer it, so that makes it a curiosity rather than a viable tabletop miniature. But it looks great and would pair up against other what-if Zvezda vehicles like the German Maus Super Heavy tank. Detail is good, and if sufficient care is taken, it goes together well. Do you want to build one of these? Zvezda hasn't announced any new 15mm kits, so I have no idea what's coming next. I hope you enjoyed this review, and seeing my screw-up might help you avoid the same difficulty. If you enjoy Fog of War, make sure you subscribe to be notified of new videos.